In the Nooksack River watershed in the northwest corner of Washington state, a severe decline in salmon stocks is weakening the social, economic, and spiritual fabric of the local communities. To address the challenge of salmon habitat restoration, the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe formed a partnership with Whatcom County and local community groups to plan, design, and build the South Fork Nooksack Lower Hutchinson Creek project.
My name is Randy Kinley. My Indian name is Pakwitsit. I am a full-blooded Lummi tribal member. I am currently acting as an ESA policy representative for the Lummi Nation, working on salmon recovery. This project here is one of many projects, but a priority project because of the South Fork stock that is in dire straits and be needed as far as salmon recovery, because in a period of probably 5 or fewer years, this stock will be gone.
You've got a valuable fish species that is endangered, and it's almost certainly been put in danger by human activity.
And the South Fork population is heavily depressed. In the last few years, we've looked at 130 and 120 fish returning to the South Fork.
Today, over my shoulder, there's people fishing, and I'm laughing to myself because, as far as I know, there's nothing there to be caught. And I know that the summer run Chinook and the other fish like deep cold water in these holes, and we don't have them anymore. They're gone. Mother Nature, man, whoever, they're gone.
We used to have all kinds of salmon in Bellingham Bay. Now that's all gone. That's diminished. There's no more.
In some ways, the Chinook salmon is the most powerful emblem of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's a heroic fish in what it does, and it's going to sea and its return and its long journeys up the river, and then it gives birth to a new generation and dies. And I think that if we lose the Chinook salmon, we lose a bit of all of us.
The Lummi Nation is known as the Salmon People. Its livelihood, well-being, and culture are unquestionably bound with the health of salmon stocks in the Nooksack River.
What is the relationship between the salmon and the Lummi people? Relationship is lifelong, from the cradle to the grave. Salmon has always been important to our people. Our people have always lived off the land. Now we're finding it more and more impossible to do that. We enjoy the memories that we used to have when the salmon was so plentiful that any given day you could go out and get a salmon for your table.
The spring Chinook is so sacred to us as Indian people. You know, the spring Chinook is what we call spreading the table. It's the start of the season for us.
My name is Michael Maudlin. I'm a geologist with the Lummi Indian Nation. The Nooksack has 2 endangered species. It has bull trout and it has Chinook salmon. The South Fork Chinook are a pretty unique batch of fish. If we look at Chinook salmon across the Puget Sound, which is the endangered population of Chinook, the Nooksack populations are genetically much different than the bulk of those populations. And so in order to maintain the diversity across the entire Puget Sound, the Nooksack populations need to be recovered. It's also considered at a high risk of extinction due to the watershed conditions in the South Fork. So you couple those two things together and it makes it a very high priority for recovery, not just local recovery, not just people in Whatcom County, but across Puget Sound it's important to recover these fish.
The Lower Hutchinson Creek project is a powerful example of how local partnerships can rise to meet the challenge of salmon recovery. It can only succeed as a community-based movement. This movement brings together Native American tribes, local governments, nonprofits, landowners, and community groups in restoration partnerships. Guided by an understanding of habitat factors limiting the productivity of the fish stocks, these partnerships can gather state, federal, local, and private funding to preserve and restore habitats essential to their recovery. The project stems from a comprehensive assessment of fish habitat in the South Fork conducted in 2000 and 2001 by the two tribes, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association. Its product, the South Fork Nooksack Saxon to Acme Reach Assessment, was published in 2001.
There's three main limiting factors to Chinook salmon in the South Fork Nooksack River, particularly in this reach of the river. Those three would be high water temperatures during the summer, elevated sediment levels in the river, so fine sediment that tends to smother eggs, and a lack of habitat diversity. And habitat diversity really represents pools and complex wood cover for the fish, give them places to hide and out of the high velocity of the river. One of the main things limiting habitat formation in the South Fork is bank protection work. That's the rock work that protects people's property from erosion. In this case, the historic channel migration area, the place that the river has occupied over the last 100 years or so, was about 1,200 meters wide through here. And with a series of rock bank protection projects, that width was narrowed to about 200 meters. And so when you narrow that width, you start losing the processes of channel migration and recruiting wood and depositing sediment.
I see this as being kind of a two-part restoration project. You're removing a constriction on one bank of the Nooksack River to allow it to flow and interact with the floodplain, which is very good for salmon. As rivers like this, most rivers in western Washington, have not been recruiting large woody debris for quite some time due to land use practices. And even at one point in time, not too long ago, people thought that wood in the stream was actually part of the reason for the decline of salmon. They thought wood in the stream actually blocked salmon migration, which was misguided. So projects like this are sort of a short-term booster for creating complex habitat back in these rivers while the riparian areas are growing up and maturing.
Formal community outreach efforts began in April of 2001. A suite of 20 prospective projects was prioritized for benefit to fish and assessed for practical feasibility during 2003 and 2004. The process involved stakeholder interviews, discussions with riverside landowners, articles in the local newspaper, site tours with Whatcom County River and Flood Division engineers, and Acme Van Zandt Subzone Committee members. The project was sited on the east bank of the river on Whatcom County Parks Department property, protected by an environmental easement held by the Whatcom Land Trust.
My name is Rand Jack. I'm on the board of directors of the Whatcom Land Trust. The Land Trust has been longtime partners with the tribes, and particularly with the Lummi Nation, in trying to restore habitat on the South Fork of the Nooksack River. The goal is to increase the space for spawning in and around Hutchison Creek, and at the same time, built into the project are responses to neighboring landowners who are concerned about potential flood issues created through the project.
In May of 2004, a draft design for the Lower Hutchinson Creek project was presented at a meeting of the Acme community. Feedback from residents during this meeting included substantial concerns from some downstream landowners that the project would increase risk to their properties during major flooding events.
Who is financially responsible and who is criminally responsible?
My question is, part of those jams are going in an area where there is no water.
The structures are lined up on that access, so that essence becomes...
Where's the works in the field?
It's way up there.
My name is Robert Knutson. I live on the Saxon Road by the Saxon Bridge on the South Fork of the river. I'm a member of the countywide Flood Advisory Committee. Helped organize and get the South Fork Van Zandt Saxon subzone going, was chair of it for several years. I heard that the tribes were going to have a project on the river, and I wanted to talk to them and get going on it. And I don't know how many times we walked up and down the river looking at spots, places, changing plans from pie in the sky to reality and back again. There's been, in the years since, a tremendous amount of back and forth between the project planners, the subzone and the countywide. It's the kind of thing that has to have local involvement, has to have everybody working together, because if they ain't working together, something's going to go wrong.
I think it's been a really nice project in terms of people finally listening and talking to each other and understanding each other's needs. And I think the end product is that the habitat, the needs and interest of the tribe, the needs and interest of the land trust, the needs and interest of the neighboring property owners, and probably most importantly, the needs and interests of the Chinook salmon are all being responded to in a pretty bold and creative way.
Based on feedback from the community meeting and from the Acme Van Zant Subzone Committee, the design process went back to the drawing board. A new design better addressed the fears of downstream residents. The final design removed 400 feet in the South Fork Channel and replaced it with a setback levee protecting the high ground and the mouth of an old river channel. The design included 6 major engineered log jams and 90 smaller habitat wood placements. This design was approved by all project partners and had a favorable reception at a final community meeting in May of 2006.
The log jams have a couple different functions. There's 6 log jams, and as a group they're designed to help split the flow of the river into smaller channels and reduce the energy in those channels. Provide a lot of kind of off-channel habitat for the fish to use away from the main stem. Also to slow the migration of the river as we remove the rock revetment and set it back. We don't want the river necessarily moving wildly back through that area. The location of these log jams is designed to take advantage of Hutchinson Creek, which flows into the South Fork. It's about 10 degrees cooler than the South Fork during the summer, and it can provide an important area for fish to get out of the warm water and kind of pull into a side area where there's cooler water.
Construction was provided by Do Construction, a small business owned by tribal members Bob and Darlene Doucette. A majority of the Do Construction employees were tribal members. Lummi Natural Resources Department furnished tribal employees to perform general labor, sediment control, fish rescue, and other tasks.
My name is Bob Doucette, owner of Do Construction. In relation to the project, we're the general contractor on this one. We're contracted with Lummi and Nooksack. It's interesting how much thought's gone into this to create this and the alignments to the river. My whole crew's excited about being here, you know, being in the salmon restoration project. You're gonna want to do this type of work. You know, you just, this is not an 8 to 5, and it's dirty, it's grubby, it's noisy.
Wood collection began in 2003 with land clearing for the new Lummi Tribal School. Large wood was collected from over a dozen land clearing sites over a 3-year period. Over 250 large pieces, 60 feet long with roots still attached, and hundreds of smaller trees and logs were eventually assembled at the project.
This pile of logs, as you can see, they're probably 80 plus years old. It's this kind of scale of material that's needed for effective log jams in a tributary system such as the South Fork Nooksack, because when the springtime comes around, there's such large quantities of water that come through. If it's not built with items like, with pieces like this, then it's going to blow out. It's going to give way.
My name is Frankie Bob. I'm a Lummi tribal member, displaced fisherman. On this particular site, we brushed the line for the road so the contractor can come in and punch the road in. Then once the road is in, we came in and laid out the silt fences.
2.5 acres of project site were cleared of trees and brush. Silt fences and silt booms were installed around the cleared site to keep sediment generated by construction from entering the river. Temporary bridges were placed over Hutchinson Creek. Hutchinson Creek ran down the middle of the project site. It was diverted around the head of the project area to protect juvenile fish and water quality during construction. As the creek was diverted into the new channel, flows into the old channel were decreased gradually to encourage juvenile fish to migrate away. Biologists and fisheries technicians relocated remaining fish to the river. "400 feet of dike were removed to restore the South Fork Nooksack access to its floodplain. The dike had been built in the 1960s to compensate for the impacts of upstream dike building and to stop the natural process of channel migration. 2 of the 3 log jams built adjacent to the South Fork's active channel were built where the dike had stood for 40 years. A 450-foot setback levee was built along high ground to the east. Its purpose was to assure that the river could not reoccupy an old channel running to the northeast and threaten damage to downstream property and infrastructure. Thousands of yards of large limestone rock were carried to a stockpile area. In all, over 8,000 cubic yards of large limestone rocks went into the setback levee. Wooden piles were an important stability insurance element of the engineered log jam design. 45-foot-long pilings were sharpened and driven 35 feet into the ground at each log jam site in groups of 12. The pilings pinned the jams in place at the highest flood flows. Driving the 72 wooden piles deep into compacted gravel and rock took 10 days. To ensure that large foundation logs were seated well below the level that the river would scour to, the log jam foundations were excavated 20 feet deep. To cope with the water rushing into the holes, 2 to 3 large pumps were kept running continuously. It was also critical to quickly place the bottom layers of large wood before the unstable excavations collapsed. The foundation trees and key member layers of the log jams were 36 to 40 inches in diameter and 60 feet long. These pieces weighed up to 10 tons. It took very precise and swift work to lock these trees in place between the pilings 20 feet down in a hole. The foundation layers were packed with logging slash and was backfilled with gravel. Work continued with the placement of subsequent interlocking layers of large trees, smaller racking member trees, and logs. A completed log jam contained 12 to 14 very large trees, 175 to 225 smaller trees, and 80 cubic yards of slash. Only the top third of a completed log jam structure was visible above the ground surface.
These are the racked pieces, and you expect this to accumulate more wood in the front and sort of a scour pool on the sides and a gravel bar behind it. It's incredible to see the magnitude of these structures, and what I think will be really interesting is to watch how they interact with the river at different flows. I think this is all going to change fairly dramatically over the next, several years.
When the 3 engineered log jams along the current South Fork Channel were completed, the ground around them was broken up and large trees and other woody materials from land clearing were arranged around them. Hutchinson Creek's channel was restored and large habitat wood was placed along its banks and at the bends in the creek. 3 more log jams were built between Hutchinson Creek and the new setback levee. These are areas into which the river will migrate. The completed project features 6 major engineered log jams, 30 complex habitat structures, and 50 large individual habitat pieces. The entire project area will be planted with trees to complete the project.
Right now we're standing in basically the culmination of all these years of talking and working.
On these large tributary and river system kinds of projects, they're just, the magnitude of effort is huge. And as you can see with these logs behind us, it's just a small portion. You could virtually see 3 or 4 times that need there. But it's really trying to re-establish a natural system of which has been neglected for the last 100+ years. Being the Tribal Wildlife Grant, our intent is to try to make this carry out exactly what it's doing, and that is implementing and forwarding tribal sovereignty in these arenas that have typically been absent their voice.
This project represents a culmination of efforts of a lot of people and a lot of imagination on the part of the Lummis and the Nooksacks to try to make a significant difference in the population of Chinook salmon on the South Fork.
This was a representative example of how partnerships between tribal governments can accomplish large activities on ceded lands, and the value of that is just enormous.
Things like endangered species are indicators of our overall environmental health, and When we recover these endangered species, it's saying important things about how we're managing the land, that we're doing it in a better way.
Well, you can bounce your grandson off your knee now and sit there and say, hey, we drove pine needles in the South Fork.
We're reestablishing habitat that had been originally taken off by the dikes and levees throughout the South Fork. And I think it's important. I think it's important for the ecosystem, the environment, and the fish.
And a project like this, if it works as predicted and advertised, will create some deep holding water again for the fish, and maybe, just maybe, my kids as grandkids will be able to see what I saw.
I consider it a privilege to be involved in this, because I think that you, in today's sort of ragtag, run from one thing to another world, you look around for things that can give meaning to your life. You look around for things that can have some kind of enduring impact, and this is one of those things. I think what we're doing here, and it ranges all the way from the guys driving the piles to the engineers who planned it to the people like Jim Hansen who helped conceive of the project. It's really everybody working together that makes it work, and there's just a lot of satisfaction in doing something that's not part of you, but something that addresses things outside of you and has a long-term effect, not only for this generation, but for generations to come.
Keeping the focal point on the salmon, how important they are to all people, not only just the Native Americans, but to all people. So we have to learn how to live together, work together, and join forces in protecting our environment.